The deadline came and went, and Jonathan Taylor is still a member of the Indianapolis Colts. But is there any chance of the relationship being repaired or even Taylor playing for the Colts again? And what's to make of all of these roster moves? Well, let's talk about it. Welcome to the Horseshoe Huddle Podcast presented by Fan Nation on SI.com, part of the Fans First Sports Network. My name is Andrew Moore, and I'm joined here as always by my fellow writer, co-host, and analyst at horseshoehuddle.com, Drake Wally. Drake, another episode talking about Jonathan Taylor. I wish it wasn't so, to be honest with you. I wish we were actually talking about maybe a resolution to all of this, but like sands through the hourglass, so is the Jonathan Taylor saga. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing really good, and there's been some good things to also talk about that have happened as well, which we'll cover. But look, man, for the people out there that aren't wanting to hear any more of this, well, there's a really solid chance that it's going to dominate the headlines for a little bit longer. But hey, at least the regular season is like 11 days away, so there's that to look forward to. But I'm still excited to talk about it because it's Colts football, it's NFL football, so I'm ready to dive into this.
Right. And guess what, Drake? Literally a week from tonight, we have regular season football. Detroit Lions against the Kansas City Chiefs. And a week from tonight, you and I will be previewing Jacksonville Jaguars versus the Indianapolis Colts. Can't wait. Shout out to my wife getting in the super sticker early. As she says, I'm sick of hearing about Taylor. I think everybody is at this point, but we've got to dive into the latest. We're going to talk about Chris Ballard's comments, everything that to get everybody up to speed on where things are with Jonathan Taylor. So appreciate my beautiful wife, Danielle, with the super sticker. Shout out to Quentin. Quentin is finally back tonight. It's good to see you here making the show live. Sarah is here. Good to see you. She says, I'm over this JT saga.
We're going to see a lot of those comments, I think.
We definitely are. Stats Matt says we've got a 53-man roster. And yes, this episode just isn't going to be about Jonathan Taylor. We are going to talk about the roster cuts that were made this week, the waiver claims, the practice squad. We'll talk all about it. Nathan Comanci is here saying the media is blowing it out of proportion. John Fanchar is here. What's up to you, my guy? Daniel Miller as well. We're going to have a fantastic show tonight. And before we get started, I did want to give you guys a lot of praise, a lot of thanks just for following along with us here at Horseshoe Huddle, not only with the podcast, but at horseshoehuddle.com. Horseshoe Huddle has had this month is the second best month in the history of Horseshoe Huddle because you guys are reading all the content we've been putting out, following along with all the shows, all the podcasts, everything that this roller coaster of a preseason and training camp has brought for the Indianapolis Colts. So really, really wanted to shout out to all of you guys and just say Drake and I, Jake, Zach, Shad, the entire Horseshoe Huddle team are very, very thankful for all of your support. It really means so much to us. And if you haven't jumped on the bandwagon yet, there is still time. Go ahead and like us on Facebook at Horseshoe Huddle. Go follow at Colts on FN on Twitter and subscribe to the Horseshoe Huddle YouTube channel. Click that bell so you know whenever Drake and I are going live, whenever Shad goes live with the Saddle Up show, so you never miss an episode. And if you can't catch us live, Apple, Spotify, Google, wherever you listen to podcasts, we're on there as well. So make sure you give us a 5-star rating and subscribe on there. But Drake, let's dive right in. Let's talk about it. The Colts do not trade Jonathan Taylor. The deadline of Tuesday at 4 p.m. that the Colts had set, it has gone by. And Jonathan Taylor's still on the team. The Colts end up placing him on the PUP list, the physically unable to perform list. So when all of that went down, what was your gut reaction? Seeing Jonathan Taylor wasn't traded, and that he was still going to be a member of the Colts.
You know, it both surprised and not surprised. I know that's such a cheesy answer, but it's like I felt like the relationship was so I think it was Nate Atkins put it perfectly, that they both want two completely different things. So like they're real far apart on an agreement. So I was like, he's going to get traded. But then I thought I wouldn't be surprised at all if he doesn't get traded because of simply what the Colts are asking for and how it really comes off like they weren't going to want to trade him at all. So I was kind of on both ends, but I also thought to myself, once the results went down and he was officially staying with the Colts per the 53-man roster deadline and per the Colts deadline, not the trade deadline, people, that's October 31st, to be clear. I still thought to myself, what's next here? Like after all of this drama and craziness, what could possibly be to come? So that's probably a bigger reaction. That was my bigger reaction than, surprised and not surprised is what is going to happen now after all this already has happened before.
Yeah, and I was kind of in that same boat, to be honest with you. I mean, we literally went live and talked about this on Monday night, and we posed the question to each other if we thought Jonathan Taylor was going to be traded, and we both said yes. At first, when he was given the deadline and allowed to seek a trade, I was on the fence saying, like, this isn't going to happen. But as we heard more and more, as we heard that more teams were interested and things kind of took off from there, I started to buy into it. Maybe there is a chance that a team is going to offer enough to pursue Jonathan Taylor, and the Colts are going to get an offer that they're pleased with and are able to part ways. But as we got closer to that deadline, it just seemed more and more likely that Taylor was going to stay with the Colts. And when then you take a step back, really the viewpoint shouldn't have changed from the very beginning. The Colts did not ever want to trade Jonathan Taylor. They did allow him to go out there to seek a trade and find a partner just to see what was out there. But as reports have come out now, the Colts asking price was still very, very high. It was obvious from the very beginning that the Colts didn't want to trade Jonathan Taylor, and they held true to that throughout the entire last week when this whole thing was going down. So really it's not surprising that Jonathan Taylor is still a member of the Colts, but in the heat of the moment, there was still that chance and still the thought, this really could go through and Jonathan Taylor could be playing elsewhere.
Yeah, I actually want to highlight a comment here from Scott Hacker. He says, repping the shoe from Florida. Thank you so much for jumping on. And also, that's dedication right there, pal.
Shout out to Scott.
Yeah, shout out to you, man. And it's interesting that you are from Florida because one of the teams that me and Andrew were like, this is a shoe-in squad to get Jonathan Taylor was the Miami Dolphins. That was probably my number one pick for a trade destination. But yeah, it just kind of seemed like as the moments got closer, as it hit 3:00 and as it hit 3:30, I started to think all at once, yeah, they're probably in that war room right now or in the facility just saying, we're not going to trade him, like no matter what comes through at this point. So I agree with you, though. I was kind of on both ends, but I guess now looking back, it makes sense because they really, you got to think about back to Jim Irsay's tweet. Everything can change, right? But, he said, we're not trading him now. We're not trading him by October 31st. So far, that's 100% stood true. They just allowed him to seek a trade, but they haven't gone through with it.
Right. And then Chris Ballard talked to the media yesterday. He started talking for about 30 seconds saying, this is a really tough time of year with roster cuts and everything, but he knew the questions were coming. And he said, all right, let me get ahead of the elephant in the room with Jonathan, because I know there's going to be questions. And sure enough, that's what dominated the press conference yesterday. And he talked about it. He talked about how much he cares about Jonathan Taylor still, how this is a business. And while their relationship it's quite frankly, it sucks right now. It's not good. The situation with Jonathan Taylor and the Colts, point blank, Chris Ballard said it sucks. And it really does. But it's at the same time, he said he would never let football get in the way of how much he cares about the person. And Chris Ballard, I mean, when you look at him yesterday, he looked like a man that was hurt because he does care about Jonathan Taylor. Not even so the football player, but just the person that Jonathan Taylor is. And this is all brand new for Chris Ballard as well. Drake, I mean, since he became the general manager of the Colts back in 2017, yeah, there have been some disagreements with players and contract situations and money, but it's never been like this. It's never played out this publicly. It's never gotten this messy before. And this is new territory for the GM and for the running back. So, but Chris Ballard is still holding out hope. And that was obvious as well. I mean, he said the ultimate goal is that Jonathan Taylor is a part of this team long term. So he still wants to be able to get a deal done. And that's the position the Colts have held throughout this entire thing. And the Colts have never wavered on this. They still would love for Jonathan Taylor to be a part of this team long term. They just want to make sure he's healthy, make sure he works in this Shane Steichen offense, make sure he works with Anthony Richardson. And if all goes well, they will pay him a handsome contract extension, and he will be have the chance to be in Indianapolis for a long time. But when you have Jonathan Taylor, who is still dealing with that ankle injury that's going on 8 months now, he wants to be paid now because he feels like he has done enough and shown enough to the organization to prove his worth, and throw in the fact that trust between Jonathan Taylor and the organization isn't the same as it was because of how he felt he was treated last year and pushed to play, even though the ankle wasn't 100%. You can see why both sides feel the way they do, and both points are valid. And it just really is a terrible situation that they find themselves in right now. And really, in a nutshell, it's kind of as simple as that.
Yeah, and we've mentioned at times, kind of loosely, never like fully jumping on the argument, but look, running back is not what it used to be in the NFL. You can get by with a committee backfield, but here's the thing. There's still the unicorns in the NFL at running back. There's still a few. And Nick Chubb is one. Alvin Kamara is one. Derrick Henry is one. Well, look, say what you want. Jonathan Taylor still is one. Okay, like he would absolutely change the offense to a degree. And you're looking at a guy who did it with Carson Wentz. He could absolutely probably do it with Anthony Richardson. If Carson Wentz could move like Anthony Richardson can, and they had a play calling style like Shane Steichen with Frank Reich, man, they probably make the playoffs. Okay, like there's plenty of arguments on both sides. And again, that's kind of why it sucks, because outside of Michael Pittman, he is still the most consistent weapon. Until he's not wearing a Colts uniform and officially isn't on the roster anymore, he is one of the most consistent, if not the most consistent weapon that the Colts have.
Exactly. And I mean, as I've already mentioned, the Colts never wanted to trade Taylor. And so that's one big reason of why he wasn't traded on Tuesday and why he is still a part of the team. But another part of this, Drake, is simply the offers weren't there for Jonathan Taylor. They weren't to the level that the Colts were wanting to be to even consider parting ways with Jonathan Taylor. And I know a lot of the people in the national media are saying, well, that they don't value Jonathan Taylor enough to pay him, but then they want this high compensation for him. Those people are missing the point. The Colts do value Jonathan Taylor. They don't want to trade him, and because they value him so much, they wanted much in return to part ways with him, and they just simply never received that.
Yeah, and I don't think it was ever, if there was any like thinking we'll trade him, it was very far in the back of both. I'll just go ahead and say it was in the back of Chris Ballard's mind, not Jim Irsay's. I think Chris Ballard's the one driving this bus. Okay, like
he 100% is.
Yeah, people want to throw it on Irsay. No, it's Ballard. Okay, Irsay allowed Ballard to pick the coach. He allowed Ballard to get the quarterback. He's also allowing Ballard to try to get this thing done with Taylor. So, I also saw a comment that the Dolphins never made an offer. They absolutely made an offer, and the Colts turned it down. I mean, there were offers made, but it was never really in their mind. They didn't exceed a third rounder. The Colts were saying that we want a first rounder or a package that, is the same as one. And I think that one of the comments in our last episode asked, what does it mean for a package to be equivalent to a first rounder? It's kind of vague, but it really just means, either you add players or draft picks that the Colts will say to themselves, okay, this is worthy of a first round pick altogether type thing. But he's also still on the physically unable to perform list. Okay, like he still is not healthy. The ankle is still bothering him. And those are just a couple of reasons. There's others, but we don't have time in the episode to talk about them because otherwise we could probably make a whole episode out of why they didn't trade him because it was almost a month-long deal, asking for this trade. So I'm not at the end of the day, I'm more not surprised than I am surprised that they didn't trade him after just kind of hearing the types of offers they got and hearing Ballard talk about it a little more. It makes sense. It makes sense why they didn't do it.
Exactly. And you just mentioned Jonathan Taylor is still on the physically unable to perform list, which means he will miss at least the first 4 games of the season here, regardless if he is traded or not. He still can be traded while on the PUP list. However, he still has to miss those 4 games. So with that in mind, Drake, yes, he will miss at least the first 4 games. But if things still aren't resolved or the Colts or Jonathan Taylor isn't healed up, it could be longer than that. So I'm going to pose the question to you. Do you think Jonathan Taylor suits up in a Colts uniform this year?
Oh man. I would go on the side of yes. Actually, I would go on the side that I think that at some point he is going to be able to rehab that ankle because there's an extra 4 weeks that he's going to be able to do it. He also still has the rest of, at least another 10, 11 days until the Colts do play. So he's got time to make this happen. Okay. And he's been rehabbing it this whole time. It's not like he's been out there, trying to get hurt. So I think that there is a chance that he can do it. I also think that there's so many quote unquote risks at this point with trading for Jonathan Taylor, because like you said, on top of everything, he's got to sit out those first 4 games if you get him, and if you're a team that's right on the cusp of making a playoff run, you don't want to wait 4 games. You know what I mean? And so I think that there is the chance, but again, it's so difficult to figure out because you got to go back and look at the smorgasbord of samples that you've had coming up to this point and all of like the back and forth and the negativity that's been going on with his agent, him and the Colts. But man, I'm going to go with the high road and the positive side of things. I'm going to say that, I still think it's going to be maybe a couple weeks after week 5, but maybe week 8, week 9, you'll see him behind Anthony Richardson.
Yeah, I agree. And at this point, really, I feel like Jonathan Taylor has to play for the Indianapolis Colts. And Patrick, good to see you, buddy. He has it right here. I think he almost has to, or else he's a restricted free agent.
Good point.
And that's right, because if Jonathan Taylor doesn't play this year and he continues to hold in or say that he's still hurt and he never comes off that pup list or is activated, you have to remember that then Jonathan Taylor loses an accrued season and his contract would basically roll over into the next season. So he would still be on the final year of his rookie deal next season, and he would lose the ability to be an unrestricted free agent. He would be a restricted free agent, and then any contract that he is offered, the Colts would have the first right to match that contract as well. So, and Patrick explains it just a little bit more. He has to play more than 6 games, or at least be active for more than 6 games. Thank you for reading my mind there, Patrick.
He's not just the CFO, he's the CIO, the
Central
Intelligence Officer.
Exactly. Good to see you, buddy. But at this point, it feels like if he does get healthy, he has to play. If not, then things are just going to continue to snowball and get worse for Jonathan Taylor. And so at this point, I would say it's likely that we do see him in a Colts uniform. When that's going to be the big question. So obviously, Drake, let's give the options for what Taylor does have. I mean, he could either get healthy, come back and play, come off the pup. We just talked about that, but what are the other options that Taylor has this season, or what are some of the ways that it could really play out?
Well, I mean, outside of, getting healthy, you could say that he could continue to look for a trade because it's absolutely possible. I mean, that deadline is still 2 months on the dot, actually, still 2 months away. He could still look for a trade. I think that he's probably going to continue the contract negotiations. His agent is not going to stop. He hasn't stopped up to this point. He sure as hell isn't going to stop now. So I think that those two are the big things. I also think there's a chance that maybe he packs it in and just says, if the offers didn't come now, are they going to come later? Because I really think the only way he gets a really good deal, or the Colts get just an awesome offer, is if a team, knock on wood, has a running back go down that's a prominent piece, and they really feel like, okay, we were doing just fine. We got to get a guy now. And they feel like maybe Jonathan Taylor could supplant that guy long-term that got hurt, which that's a weird situation, but I just don't see him finding a suitor at this point. If he didn't find one now, I just don't see him finding one after, you know what I mean? So I think that that's a possibility where he just kind of like packs it in and says, look, I'm going to get healthy and I'm going to play out this final year and we'll see what my worth is at the end of the season. Maybe he makes a huge impact, a bigger one than even he thought he could make for the team, given how negative this whole situation is between both parties.
Right, exactly. Wanted to clarify something here. Our buddy Noah Compton is in the chat. He asked, doesn't the 4 weeks on PUP also count as 4 weeks / games when factoring what constitutes an accrued season? It does not. So Stats Matt coming in clutch here. He does have to be active, Noah, for it to count or factor into being an accrued season. So he does have to be active because on the reserve physically unable to perform list, he isn't active, and he currently doesn't even count against the Colts 53-man roster. So that's why he has to be off the PUP list and active for at least those 6 games to get an accrued season. Before we move on here, Drake, last question about Jonathan Taylor, and then we'll dive right into the roster cuts here for the Colts. But it's a big one. In your opinion, do you think the Colts and Jonathan Taylor can repair their relationship? And if so, or what do you think the chances that ultimately ends up happening?
I mean, I absolutely think there's a chance that they could repair it because, look, man, the pickings are starting to get, and Jonathan Taylor, I think he's first off, he's incredibly intelligent. Okay. The guy is incredible. And I mean, very high level, intelligent, smart. So he's not stupid. He's not over here, questioning his value. He knows that, look, those offers didn't even exceed a second rounder. Okay. That shows the other teams telling Taylor your health, the attitude right now, the relationship, you're coming off of an ankle injury. All of that makes us not really want to pony up much for you. And it's sinking in, I think, for Taylor. So I think that's going to play a factor in repairing the relationship. I think as far as the chances, I originally put 30%. I think it's more like 50 because I think that Taylor is going to realize, kind of going back to what I just said, that the Colts are the best destination for him. And also he might need to legitimately show the rest of the league, hey, I went from having Frank Reich as a coach, right, to changing the scheme, making it work in that scheme with a rookie quarterback. And now my market value is better. Maybe he sees this as an opportunity to get healthier and show that he's worth that market value that him and Malky Kawa have been preaching to these other teams, mostly Malky Kawa. But I think there's a chance. I think that there's a 50% chance that it gets repaired. And, maybe he can go out there and, like I said, he can get healthy and actually show his worth in the NFL with a new team and a dynamic quarterback.
Want to highlight a question real quick, and then we got to get to the CFO's comment on here as well. Wyatt Law asks, can't Jonathan Taylor begin practicing after the second week on PUP? And Stats Matt, again, doing the Lord's work. That is on injured reserve. He cannot practice while on the physically unable to perform list either. So that clarifies that. But Patrick Wire here with the $5 super chat. Really, really appreciate it, buddy. And Patrick is giving a shout out to our our fellow colleague, Rashad McGinnis, who does a fantastic job for us here at Horseshoe Huddle, and an even better person. Just love Shad, and so glad he's a part of our team. Patrick says, couldn't recommend more for everyone right after this to go watch Shad's show from last night about this entire situation. And yes, Shad did a really good job last night explaining everything about this situation. I can kind of give you a summary from about 1,000 feet up, but definitely go watch the Saddle Up show that Shad had last night. So all of this with Jonathan Taylor, it didn't just start this summer when the Colts wouldn't offer him a contract negotiation. This goes all the way back to November. And I talked about this and really tried to detail this in my piece that dropped this morning on horseshoehuddle.com, talking about the relationship between Chris Ballard and the Colts and Jonathan Taylor. So back when this ankle injury first happened last year, it was right around the time of November, right when Jeff Saturday was announced as the head coach for the Indianapolis Colts. Jonathan Taylor feels that Jeff Saturday and the Colts pushed him to play on an injured ankle before it was ready. Before he was still having those ankle issues last year. Jeff Saturday said, try to push through it, try to play. We need to get a win here. So Taylor goes out against the Raiders, has a pretty decent game, but the thing is that was the start of making that ankle much, much worse. And Jonathan Taylor was never the same after that game. And because of that, Jonathan Taylor lost a lot of trust with the Colts organization because he felt like Jeff Saturday and the Colts coaching staff at the time pushed him to play when he wasn't ready. And so when you combine that, and he has the surgery in January, that this very I wouldn't say routine surgery, but it wasn't invasive by any means. The surgery that Jonathan Taylor had typically has a 4 to 6 week recovery. Linebacker EJ Speed had this same exact surgery in the offseason as well. And EJ Speed is fine. He's been 100% with his ankle for a long time now. Jonathan Taylor had that surgery in January. Now we are in August. It's September 1st is tomorrow, and that ankle still isn't healed. Jonathan Taylor is still reporting pain in that ankle. Now, do I know 100% certain what is still wrong with that ankle? No, I'm not a doctor. I'm not on the Colts medical staff, so I don't know the details of that. But Chris Ballard even said it yesterday, and this is what we've been hearing behind the scenes, that Jonathan Taylor is continuing to report pain in that ankle 8 months later. So, and before that, Jonathan Taylor had never had a major injury in his entire career. Going back through high school, through college, he had never had a major injury. And yet then he suffers this when he feels like Jeff Saturday and the Colts pushed him to do that. That's really where everything started. And then for him to go out there, he feels like he did that, put himself in harm's way. And now the Colts are wanting to do a more wait and see approach on his ankle. That's a lot of where this animosity comes from. Yes, I know a lot of people want to blame Malky Kawa for all this. Yes, I would say his agent definitely hasn't made things easier. He has certainly gone about some things the wrong way, but this is way past his agent. This goes way deeper than that. And that he feels like the Colts aren't being upfront and honest with him about this. Now, Chris Ballard said yesterday, obviously he said we would never be pushing a player to go out there and play while they're still hurt. And we probably will never know exactly if that actually happened, where Jeff Saturday pushed Taylor to go play before he was ready. But at the same time, that doesn't really matter at this point. Taylor feels like that's what happened, and the Colts are saying they want to see him healthy before they pay him, and that's why Taylor just feels like he doesn't have trust in the organization anymore. So you can see why he might feel that way. You can also see why the Colts feel like they want to see him go out there and be healthy before they give him a long-term deal, a lot of guaranteed money, and pay a running back top dollar before he's even able to go back out on the field. So Do I think the relationship, after that long speech, I apologize, but
No, it's all good. That's
after,
perfect.
do I think that this relationship can be repaired? I'm not going to say never, but we're a long ways from that. It's going to take a long time for that relationship to be repaired. Now, from the Colts side, it's easy. If they see Jonathan Taylor go out there and play and he's back to his old self, they'd be more than willing to give him a big time extension. But does Jonathan Taylor want to be with this team anymore? And does he trust that that's not going to happen again in his eyes, where they're going to push him and he's not ready and he's going to lose millions of dollars because of it, or get seriously hurt and hurt badly because of that? We'll have to see. But I do think that Jonathan Taylor will play in a Colts uniform again. I think he has to. There's really no other choice. But do I think the relationship can be fixed? At this point, I honestly do not know. I'm leaning towards probably not, but I'm never going to say never. We'll just have to see. And I hate that I'm copping out, but there's just so much that will have to take place first before this relationship can be repaired. And it's just a really sad situation all the way around.
Yeah, and not only are you not a doctor, you're also not a fortune teller. I mean, there's been so much that's just unfolded over the last 10 months since this whole thing started. And you also got to factor in that Jonathan Taylor was a part of an absolutely dramatic situation last year with a head coach and with an owner and with, Matt Ryan and with just the team in general. Then he has his health kind of put in question. And now, his agent, as you said, hasn't represented him in a professional manner. So now the Colts have an argument, and he doesn't have any leverage on his value, regardless of how it went down. He doesn't have leverage in this trade talk. Because the league is looking at him as a lesser player now because his position has been diminished in value. So, like you said, it's not a cop-out. It's just the truth. We'll have to wait and see. There's so many things going on. You literally just have to sit here and let the things unfold.
CFO Patrick is on a roll. He gives us another $5 super chat tonight. Patrick, thank you so much, buddy. He says, I'd be interested to see how Steichen factors into this when JT sees how different his style professionally and personally is compared to Saturday. And I know Shane Steichen has had multiple conversations with Jonathan Taylor. I also know that, and I think you guys could probably guess this, Shane Steichen isn't very happy about what's going on. He's very annoyed with this whole situation because Shane Steichen is a guy that's all about football, and he doesn't want any of the other stuff behind the scenes to go in and happen. So, and really take a distraction away from what's happening out there on the field. So that I think could be big, is if he develops trust with Shane Steichen, that wouldn't happen under his watch. If Chris Ballard can kind of show him that he still does care, and then ultimately the relationship with Jim Irsay has to get better as well. So there's just so many layers to all of this. It's all very complex and not something that is going to be resolved anytime soon. Really, really appreciate it, Patrick, as always. I want to shout out to Logan Schmidt, the other GOAT in our chat. Logan says Jalen Waddle in a first or no trade for Jonathan Taylor to the Miami Dolphins. Hey, I'm on the bandwagon there, Logan. Really great to see you, buddy. Thank you so much, as always, for all of your support. So, guys, Jonathan Taylor situation, it's gonna be around. I know people are getting sick of talking about it, but the thing is, the Jonathan Taylor situation is going to be around for at least a couple months now. But hey, guys, I've got a really easy way for you to take your mind off the entire Jonathan Taylor situation. So if you're listening to our show, obviously you're probably a fan of the Colts. Maybe you're a fan of the Jaguars. I saw that Jaguars fan in the chat earlier. Well, guess what? How would you like to attend week 1 in Lucas Oil Stadium or anywhere else, the week 1 football NFL kickoff? Well, you're in luck. Fans First Sports Network is giving away 4 free tickets to the week 1 NFL game of your choice, up to $5,000. Incredible deal where you could probably sit 50-yard line at any NFL stadium and watch your favorite team, or if it's the Colts, you can watch the Colts from the 50-yard line of Lucas Oil Stadium. up to $5,000 for 4 tickets. And the rules, Drake, they're just so easy. All you have to do is go to contest.fansfirstsports.com. Again, that's contest.fansfirstsports.com, and fill out the appropriate information, and that's it. That's it. Once you've done that, you have officially registered to win 4 free tickets to any Week 1 NFL game. What are you waiting for? Go enter for your shot at seeing your favorite team in action at contest.fansfirstsports.com. Contest ends Monday, September 4th. So make sure you go enter for your chance to win those 4 free tickets. All right, Drake. We have talked enough about Jonathan Taylor. We're 35 minutes in, and we haven't even started talking about roster cuts or additions yet. But hey, that's the world we live in Colts football. So I'm done talking about Jonathan Taylor. Let's dive right into these roster cuts, Drake. Let's start with the players that were waived, because there was a lot of movement, has been a lot of movement. If you've been following along horseshoehuddle.com, you've seen all of the different movement that has come from this Colts team. Want to give a quick shout out to Truitt for the $2 super chat. Next year, get a running back and have him grow with Anthony Richardson together. Hey, I think that might be in the cards if Jonathan Taylor isn't back next year, especially with a very good running back draft class coming up. That's always in the back of the mind of Chris Ballard and the Colts. Truitt, we really appreciate your support and for always tuning in every time we go live. It does not go unnoticed. Drake, I'm going to run through these real quick, and then once I'm done, I want you to give me a couple guys that may have surprised you a little bit that were waived. So we're going to go running back. There was a couple running backs waived, Jake Funt and Jason Huntley. Wide receivers, DJ Montgomery, Amari Rogers, Mike Strawn, a fan favorite. All of those guys were waived. Offensive lineman, Carter O'Donnell, Arlington Hambright, Dakota Shepley. Then moving on to the defensive side of the ball, we had Khalid Kareem, defensive end, defensive tackle, McTelvin Agim, defensive tackle, Caleb Sampson, Liam Anderson, and Donovan Mutton, a couple linebackers that were left go. And here's one that really captured Colts fans and hurt a lot of people. Cornerback Darius Rush, 5th-round pick out of South Carolina, was also let go along with Isaac Taylor-Stewart and Kevin Tolliver. And then a couple of safeties, Henry Black and Marcel Dabo. So, Drake, I already know what one of your surprises is going to be, but what were a couple others that surprised you that the Colts let go?
So, honestly, I still thought Marcel Dabo might have some potential to at least maybe get on the practice squad. So that one kind of it was probably the least amount of shock. But Khalid Kareem, man, I mean, he was actually having a very solid preseason. He was having a solid offseason, good training camp. You want depth at defensive end. They went and they got another guy today. I actually wrote a piece on it. Can't even remember the guy's name now, but that one kind of got me. But look, I'm just going to get this out of the way. Darius Rush really hurt because, number one, you thought he fell to the Colts. Number two, you figured he had that high potential. And, yeah, he let up some plays in the preseason, but he was a developmental project in his own right. Maybe not Anthony Richardson developmental, but he still had like a little bit of room to grow. But then right away, and Destin Adams called it, right away he got picked up by the Chiefs. I know that there was a lot of like processes where other teams had to go through, passing on him. But he went to a team that could potentially develop him. What happens if he turns into the player that the Colts got him to be with the Kansas City Chiefs? So it just sucks that he went to an AFC competitor.
Yeah, it does. And Stats Matt, I know Marcel Dabo is still around. We're not to the practice squad yet, buddy. You need to just kind of slow your roll on that one. We'll get there eventually. But yeah, Darius Rush did surprise me a little bit. Obviously, I thought the Colts would try to hang on to him at least. But at the same time, when you look at what had transpired throughout the summer and throughout the preseason, when you look at the cornerbacks that are on the roster right now, Darius Rush just simply, it ended up being a numbers game. It really did, because you got your 3 starters in Kenny Moore, Darrell Baker Jr., and Dallas Flowers. Juju Brents was probably the 4th best cornerback of the group so far. And then simply put, Jalen Jones outplayed Darius Rush. He outplayed him on defense. We saw it, and Drake and I, we even talked about this, where we saw Jalen Jones getting snaps with the second team and Darius Rush with the third team. Jalen Jones had passed Darius Rush on the depth chart. And then looking at that final cornerback spot with Tony Brown's one of your starters at gunner on special teams. So, and has been for a long time. Not only that, he also adds depth at that nickel corner position. He's the backup to Kenny Moore. So all of those things considered, and really you can't, when you're constructing a roster, it's hard to keep 7 cornerbacks on the roster at once. So it ended up just being a numbers game for Darius Rush, and wish him all the best. I hope he goes to Kansas City and succeeds. But at the end of the day, when he had his time with the Colts, he just simply didn't perform better than those 5 other guys.
Yeah, and I think that, myself included, people were like really wanting that to work out. They wanted it to be just an absolutely perfect, match made in heaven. But kind of like you pointed out, I mean, Jalen Jones, good Lord, man, he is not playing like a 7th rounder at all. No. He's playing like a guy who is going to see playing time, and all he's done is show out, and all he's done is kind of translate that lockdown, smother you corner covers or like coverage style right to the NFL so far. So props to Jalen Jones, but like you said, every one of us wishes that Darius Rush, goes out there and finds a team that he can play for and he can make a name for himself on.
Yep, Jalen Jones is making a name for himself.
Ridiculous.
And he's coming quickly. He's looked really, really good. Excited to see what he can continue to do. Let's talk about some others that were released. So the difference between waived and released, guys that are in the league for, I think it's under 3 years get waived, or 3 years and under get waived. Guys that have been in the league for longer than 3 years get released. So here are the guys that were released, and I know some of them have come back. We'll kind of talk about that in a bit. Isaiah McKenzie was released for like 2 hours for different roster management. He was re-signed, so don't worry. Isaiah McKenzie is still on the Colts roster. Other wide receivers that were released: Brashad Perriman, Vincent Smith, James Washington, Juwan Winfrey. I thought Juwan Winfrey had a chance to make the roster, but he ends up going to the practice squad. Pharaoh Brown, Dan Skipper, Alquadine Muhammad, and Rodney Harrison were the players that were released. So any surprises there? I know I touched on Juwan Winfrey, but what were some of the others that surprised you, Drake?
Well, obviously Winfrey was one, but like you said, he went to the practice squad, and we'll address that later. But Ronnie Harrison, he had some veteran appeal. He had started plenty of games. When he got added, I was like, oh, there's no way that he's not going to be on that 53-man roster. So the Colts, it just shows that what people think and what's going on within the Colts organization, or any NFL organization, totally different ways of thinking. Like, all of us were thinking Darius Rush shoe in to make the team, but as you just laid it out, it makes perfect sense how he didn't. So it makes sense why they were moved, and it kind of makes sense. But Ronnie Harrison definitely sticks out, just because I still think that he's got some decent snaps left in him for the rest of his career.
Right. And I agree. He would provide good depth at safety, and that's why we'll get to him again here. Let's move on to IR, as Patrick is just being an absolute menace in the chat, like always. But let's move to the guys that were placed on injured reserve here. Jelani Woods, tight end. He's been dealing with that hamstring injury for much of camp. He was placed on short-term injured reserve, so he did make the initial 53-man roster, but the Colts placed him on IR, meaning that he does have to miss the first 4 games as well, but can be activated after that, can practice after the first couple. And the Colts don't think he's that far away. But again, they don't want to rush things. And a hamstring injury, Drake, it's just one of those things where it can continue to keep coming up if you don't let it heal, and it just won't get any better, and would end up plaguing Jelani Woods all season long.
Yeah, and he's their starting tight end, so I can understand why they're being precautious, and they want him to be able to work with Anthony Richardson. So I think it's the right move. Let him heal up, let him show back up for week 5, and kind of leave off in an upward trajectory, kind of like he did last season.
Exactly. Now, these guys, the I'm going to be mentioning here, were all placed on season-ending injured reserve. Tight end Ricky Seals-Jones, Danny Pinter, who broke his ankle in that final preseason game against the Eagles, really tough break for him. Titus Leo, the rookie, he was also placed on season-ending IR, as well as linebacker JoJo Doman. So, Drake, I think we're both on the same page here as far as the surprise of that group. And it's a guy that really I thought had a chance to be the backup Leo and make the roster, and that's Titus Leo.
Yeah, that's the biggest surprise is you didn't really. I kind of almost came out of nowhere, but the one that sucks is JoJo Doman because it's like he had been struggling with some injuries here and there going back to college too. So it's like that one just really hurts to see. But hey, you know what? You just hope that again, like we say with all these, you just hope they can start that recovery process sooner rather than later and get back to square one.
And Patrick asked, did we ever hear what happened with Titus Leo? We have not. So Shane Steichen,
undisclosed, isn't it?
Yes, Shane Steichen and Chris Ballard both have not said why Titus Leo was placed on injured reserve, but definitely sucks for a player that I thought had a pretty good preseason. We obviously all know about Jonathan Taylor being placed on the physically unable to perform list. And then one last move of players that don't count against the 53-man roster. Chris Lamons is suspended for the first 3 games of the season for his role in a fight that happened, had to deal with Alvin Kamara this offseason. So after week 3, then the Colts will make a decision for Chris Lamons. And if I'm being honest, that'll probably just be letting Chris Lamons go. He probably will not be making the team, but they might see if they revert him to the practice squad or see if a cornerback gets injured before that time.
Yeah, and the thing is, we kind of started saying that as soon as training camp started, and you saw him getting burned by rookie Josh Downs. So Chris Lamons, he was brought in more as a depth piece. Maybe he'll be a diamond in the rough. But after this whole suspension thing, and after everything that's happened with the cornerback room, and even Darius Rush getting let go, it kind of makes sense what you just said, that once that suspension's up, he's probably just going to go right back out to free agency.
Right. So those were the roster cuts. Let's go to the roster additions. So the Colts did use that number 4 waiver priority to claim 3 different players off waivers. Offensive tackle Ryan Hayes from the Miami Dolphins. He was a 7th round pick of the Dolphins this year. Guard Josh Sills of the Eagles has some familiarity with Shane Steichen. And then this was the one that I think a lot of people are excited about. Pass rusher Isaiah Land, who was an undrafted free agent, signed with the Cowboys and had a really good preseason, really showed some flashes. The Colts were able to get him and bring him in, so I would expect Isaiah Land to be the backup Leo to Samson Ebukam this year.
Yeah, and it makes perfect sense. I mean, Chris Ballard loves his pass rushers. He loves having depth. He loves being able to rotate them in and out. I am excited about the Sills signing, and hey, the Hayes signing from the Dolphins, that's good to see, because with everything that went on with, guys like Dan Skipper, I know he got shifted over to practice squad, and Blake Freeland, it's good to see them valuing depth at tackle, because if anything happens with left or right, you want to have at least a halfway competent piece to protect Richardson and also get the run game going.
Yeah, Hayes is an athletic tackle, just needs to really work on his play strength. And being in an NFL strength and conditioning program will help. So he's kind of like the same mold as Blake Freeland. Big dude, athletic, just needs to work on his play strength. So those guys can develop together and provide some depth for the Colts on the offensive line. The Colts did sign another defensive end in Jake Martin, who was with the Texans. And just right, like you said, Drake, continuing to add pieces and depth to that defensive line. The Colts always want to keep 8 or 9 guys to consistently rotate there, and Jake Martin has definitely shown some flashes as a good pass rusher as well.
He's been a Seahawk. He's been a Texan. He's been a Bronco. He's familiar with the division. He's got 16 career sacks. I'm not saying he's out there breaking games, but I mean, he can be a good depth piece and he can be a good rotational piece. So, maybe he makes some waves. Maybe that actually turns out to be a better signing than some people might see for face value.
Exactly. So that'll be interesting to watch. I'm excited to watch how he can find a role on this defensive line, and you can never have enough pass rushers in today's NFL. So finally, let's go to the practice squad here, Drake. A lot of the guys that I mentioned previously, I'm going to mention again here on the practice squad, and then we can kind of dive into some of the roster mechanics. I know people want to talk about the wide receivers and the tight ends, so we'll definitely get to that. So on the practice squad, Jake Funk and Jason Huntley, both running backs. The Colts have now 5 wide receivers on the practice squad: DJ Montgomery, Amari Rogers, Mike Strawn, Jawan Winfrey, and Racy McMath. They added another tight end, Johnny Lumpkin. You mentioned Dan Skipper, the offensive tackle on the practice squad. Al-Qadim Muhammad, we all know him very well. He's on the practice squad along with Caleb Sampson. Liam Anderson there as well. Cornerbacks Isaac Taylor Stewart, and Darren Hall. And then your boy Marcel Dabo, Rodney Harrison, who you mentioned, Drake, and finally Henry Black. So 3 safeties there on the practice squad. So the practice squad, it was a lot of guys that the Colts already had in the building. So good to see that they were bringing back some of those. But currently right now on the Colts roster, on the Colts active roster, I should say, still only 4 wide receivers. And with Jelani Woods going to short-term injured reserve, Colts have 4 tight ends on the roster in Kylan Granson, Mo Alley-Cox, Drew Ogletree, and Will Mallory. So obviously a lot of fans want to get more wide receivers added there. We'll see if that happens, but the way they have stacked this practice squad with 5 other wide receivers, I'm not sure if a move is going to be made, Drake.
Yeah, and you could bring any one of those guys up at any time, if you make the room for them on the active roster. And most of the practice squad guys you just named, on all fairness, are wide receivers. And Mike Strawn he's got the vertical and athletic ability. Jawan Winfrey had a good preseason. I think that Amari Rogers has a lot of skills as a kick and punt returner, and DJ Montgomery had flashes. And I mean, Racy McMath actually comes from the Tennessee Titans, so like maybe he only has like 4 career catches, so maybe he has something else to show. The Colts clearly think that they've got the depth right there in the practice squad, and they can make it happen a lot easier bringing one of those guys up than it would be to bring somebody off of free agency.
Right, and I wanted to touch on this as well. Stats Matt kind of brings up my point with how many move tight ends the Colts have. They will be the wide receiver 5, and I kind of talked about this on Twitter yesterday, or X, whatever you want to call it, that when you think about the Colts tight end group, a lot of those guys, I mean, yes, they are constituted as tight ends, but a lot of those guys have receiving backgrounds. Kylan Granson was a wide receiver before moving to tight end, and he's a move tight end. You really don't put Kylan Granson in there to block. He can block, but it's not his strong suit. He's a receiving tight end. Same with Will Mallory, a guy that stretches the field, has that speed. He's a receiving tight end. Drew Ogletree is a bigger guy, 6'5" and 250 pounds, 240, 50 pounds. Big dude, big tight end. But Drew Ogletree played wide receiver in college. So when you have 3 guys that are basically big wide receivers for you, and we saw in the preseason, we saw Kylan Granson out running routes, Will Mallory, Drew Ogletree, all 3 of those guys, Shane Steichen kind of moving them around the offense there. Then once you get Jelani Woods back to be your more conventional tight end where he's in line, but you can also move him into the slot, Jelani Woods can kind of do it all. Then you can move more of those tight ends around to be one of those wide receivers. So when you have such a talented tight end group that the Colts have right now, which I think is now rivaling their deepest spot on the team, you're going to use that. And I'm glad Will Mallory did end up making the team. I had him cut in my roster prediction just because of numbers, but Will Mallory deserved to have a roster spot on this team. He went out and balled this preseason.
Yeah, and he also runs a 4.54 40-yard dash. There are receivers, wide receivers, that are designated as such that run similar speeds like that. Michael Pittman Jr. is one that sticks out. And this guy runs as or maybe a little faster than Michael Pittman Jr., and he's bigger. So it's like that makes perfect. That's the guy that stands out to me even more than Kylan Granson, just because he's been working so well with Richardson at tight end. They might keep him there and just shift Mallory to maybe more of an outside role or throw him in the slot and make him a matchup nightmare for defenses.
Yeah, so I think that's why the Colts aren't going too heavy looking for the wide receivers. They feel like they have a good amount on the practice squad that they can pull from, and expect Shane Steichen to use a lot of those move tight ends in to create mismatches there and allow Anthony Richardson to kind of use those guys in the passing game. So Drake, we kind of were talking down a little bit with all the Jonathan Taylor news. Let's end on a high note. The Colts announced their team captains today, so we want to talk about this real quick before we head out here tonight. And remember, these captains are voted on by the players. It's not Shane Steichen, it's not Chris Ballard, Irsay. It's the players that vote and choose these captains. So the Colts players voted 7 captains this year. Going to start out with a couple guys that have been captains for a long time in DeForest Buckner and Shaq Leonard. Both those guys are the heartbeat and of this defense and really the leaders of this locker room. Zaire Franklin as well started as a special teams captain, came up, and now he's one of the best defenders on the Colts. Moving to the offensive side, Quentin Nelson and Ryan Kelly, both guys on the offensive line. Quentin's been a captain before. This is Ryan Kelly's first year. Kenny Moore, a captain for his second year in a row. But Drake, the guy that also is having his first year as a captain, it's his first year in the NFL. The Colts players elected Anthony Richardson as a captain in his rookie season. How about that?
Isn't that fantastic? I mean, they even interviewed Mo Alley Cox, and he said, I think what the rest of the veterans are thinking is, quote, he's our leader. We're going to follow him. And that means that they have the utmost belief and trust in this guy if they're going to make him the captain, because that pretty much means he's going to be making the decisions on the field for the offense, maybe outside of the center who does it for the offensive line. I mean, Anthony Richardson's going to be a rookie in command of that offense on the field.
Yeah, it just says a lot about what this team thinks about Anthony Richardson, what he brings to this team, not only as a player, but as a person and a leader within this locker room. And remember, guys, only 21 years old, leading a team full of grown-ass men. Stats Matt asks, are we surprised Michael Pittman isn't one? Honestly, I'm not too surprised. I mean, Pittman is the leader of that wide receiver room for sure. But when you look at these guys, I mean, which one are you going to take off? Because there's really none of these guys I would replace replace with Pittman. So Pittman, I think, is a leader. I think he'd be close to being selected as a captain, but out of all these guys that are on there, I can't really find one that I would replace with Michael Pittman Jr. No slight to Pitt, because I love Pitt, but it's hard when you have so many leaders on the roster like the Colts do. So I think they made some good picks, Drake, and excited to see what these guys can do this season. We're almost there. Football, the regular season football, especially for the Colts, is now less than 2 weeks away.
Yeah, and hey, you know what? Get excited, because your rookie quarterback that was the number 4 pick that all this offseason was centered around, outside of Jonathan Taylor, of course, now gets to be your offensive team captain. So rejoice.
And that's our show for this evening, guys. Really appreciate everybody for tuning in and talking Colts football with us once again on this Saturday on this Thursday evening.
You heard Jeff Saturday.
We did hear Jeff Saturday, but hey, I think I'm looking forward to Saturday, looking forward to the weekend here. Wanted to give a shout out to our super chats tonight. Danielle Moore, my beautiful wife, Patrick, the CFO of Horseshoe Huddle, Logan Schmidt, and Truitt. All of you guys, thank you all so much for all of your support. We really do appreciate it. And guys, please, if you haven't done so already, Patrick is going to give us another super chat. One last note, please help me tag Zach Hicks in every piece of kicker news that drops on X. So you definitely want to do that.
Please go do it.
Yeah, it's a great joke. And Stats Matt's birthday is this weekend, so everybody wish Stats Matt a happy birthday. He is such a big supporter of the show. I've known Stats Matt for years now. Great dude. So enjoy it, buddy. Hope you have a great weekend. And if you haven't done so, please follow us on all of our socials. Go like Horseshoe Huddle on Facebook. Follow at Colts on FN on Twitter, and subscribe to the Horseshoe Huddle YouTube channel. Hit that bell so you never miss an episode, because we're going to be here all season long. If you can't catch us live, Apple, Spotify, Google, wherever you listen to podcasts, we're on there as well. So make sure you subscribe and leave a 5-star review. Drake, you have been grinding, as we all have been, on horseshoehuddle.com, cranking out news. It's been such a busy week. What can the people go check out on the site that you've written?
I'll keep it brief. A bunch of breaking news pieces, just a whole handful of them. But the one that I did that was original was 4 reasons why Jonathan Taylor staying as a Colt could bring negativity to the franchise.
Yes, definitely go check that out. It was a really good piece. And I dropped a piece this morning on all of Chris Ballard's comments surrounding Jonathan Taylor. Did a really deep dive into the relationship that has kind of divulged all the way going back to November, and just talking about where the Colts at Jonathan Taylor, Chris Ballard, where this whole thing goes from here. So make sure you go check that out and all the fantastic stories on horseshoehuddle.com. You can follow Drake at DWalsterDrake. You can follow me at Andrew Moore NFL, and we will be back on Wednesday for Horseshoe Huddle halftime. We're taking a break on Monday. Everyone enjoy the holiday weekend. Drake and I are taking just a 1 episode break before the grind of the regular season starts, but we're going to be back here live Thursday night to do our first preview episode of the season. Colts Jags is going to be a blast. So Drake and I are going to break down the whole game and get you set for week 1 in the NFL. So for Drake, I'm Andrew. Everyone, enjoy your Labor Day weekend. We'll be seeing you.